Chief Warrant Officer Layla Raven. Hernandez stared at the mission briefing screen as Command's voice crackled through the radio. Negative on Apache support. Mission too high risk for rotary wing assets. 3 miles away, her ground team was pinned down by enemy forces led by 3 high-value generals who had been hunting American troops for months. Layla looked at her AH-64 Apache helicopter sitting on the tarmac, fully armed and ready for combat. Command had refused the mission, but her fellow soldiers were about to die. She made a decision that would either save lives or end her military career forever. But to understand why Chief Warrant Officer Layla Hernandez would risk everything to disobey direct orders, you need to know how a girl from East Texas became one of the most feared Apache pilots in the United States Army. Layla Maria Hernandez grew up in Beaumont, Texas, where her father worked oil refineries and her mother taught elementary school. The Hernandez family had a simple rule. When someone needed help, you didn't ask questions or wait for permission. At 16, Layla was already working part-time jobs to help pay family bills while maintaining a 4.0 GPA and playing varsity soccer. She learned early that life didn't wait for convenient timing, and sometimes you had to make hard choices without anyone's approval. Her path to military aviation started during her senior year when an Army recruiter visited her high school. While other students walked past the display of military helicopters and advanced weapon systems, Layla stopped and stared at a poster showing an AH-64 Apache in flight. The sleek, deadly aircraft looked like something from a science fiction movie, but the recruiter explained it was real technology protecting American soldiers around the world. "You interested in flying?" the recruiter asked, noticing her fascination. "I'm interested in protecting people," Layla replied. "Can that thing really do what the poster says?" The recruiter smiled. "The Apache is the most advanced attack helicopter in the world, but it takes exceptional people to fly it. You think you're exceptional?" Layla looked him straight in the eye. "Sir, I've been exceptional at everything I've tried since I was 8 years old." 6 months later, Layla enlisted in the Army with a guaranteed slot in flight school, provided she could pass the rigorous selection process that eliminated 90% of candidates. Army aviation training revealed what her instructors called natural pilot instincts. She understood aircraft systems with an intuition that couldn't be taught, mastered complex flight maneuvers on her first attempts, and approached every training scenario like lives depended on her performance. Her call sign, Raven, came during advanced Apache training at Fort Rucker, Alabama. During a complex combat simulation, Layla maneuvered her aircraft through defended airspace with such stealth and precision that enemy radar operators never detected her approach. She appeared behind their positions like a shadow, eliminated all targets with surgical strikes, and disappeared before they understood what had happened. Hernandez just moved through that exercise like a damn raven, her instructor reported. Silent, deadly, and gone before they knew she was there. The nickname stuck, and within months, aviation units across multiple bases knew about the Mexican-American pilot who could make an Apache helicopter disappear and reappear like a ghost in combat zones. After flight school, Layla was assigned to the 1st Aviation Regiment stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Her first deployment was to Afghanistan in 2019, where she quickly earned a reputation for accepting the most dangerous missions and consistently exceeding every expectation. While other pilots followed standard procedures and waited for optimal conditions, Layla had an instinct for finding solutions that military manuals didn't cover. During her second deployment to Iraq in 2020, Layla was assigned to support joint operations with ground forces conducting counterterrorism missions against ISIS remnants. It was there she first encountered the rigid command structure that prioritized bureaucratic safety over soldier protection, and where she learned that sometimes saving lives required breaking rules. The morning of March 15, 2021, started with what should have been a routine intelligence-gathering mission. Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, was tasked with conducting reconnaissance on a suspected ISIS leadership compound near Mosul. Intelligence reports indicated minimal enemy presence, maybe 8 guards, light weapons, standard defensive positions. The reports were catastrophically wrong. The compound wasn't just an ISIS hideout, it was a major command center housing 3 of the most wanted terrorist leaders in Iraq. General Qasim al-Rashid, the regional commander for all ISIS operations in northern Iraq, General Omar al-Hakim, the chief of ISIS military strategy, and General Farid al-Mansouri, the coordinator of terrorist attacks against American forces. These weren't ordinary fighters. They were the masterminds behind attacks that had killed hundreds of American soldiers over the past 2 years. When Alpha Company approached the target at 0600 hours, they walked directly into a complex ambush involving over 60 well-armed fighters with military-grade weapons, anti-aircraft missiles, and coordinated defensive positions. The Rangers found themselves pinned down in open terrain, taking sustained fire from multiple directions with no cover and no escape routes. "All call signs. This is Ranger 6 Actual," came the desperate voice of Captain Martinez, Alpha Company's commander. "We are taking heavy contact from reinforced enemy positions. Enemy strength significantly higher than expected. Request immediate air support." At Forward Operating Base, Diamondback, 15 miles away, Layla listened to the radio traffic while conducting pre-flight checks on her AH-64 Apache. Her aircraft was fully armed with a 30mm M230 chain gun, 16 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, and 76 70mm Hydra rockets, enough firepower to eliminate an entire enemy battalion. "Raven 17, this is Tower," the air traffic controller's voice crackled through her headset. "Be advised, Ranger 6 is requesting immediate close air support for troops in contact." Layla immediately began startup procedures for her Apache. "Tower, Raven 17, ready for immediate launch. What's the tactical situation?" "Stand by, Raven 17. For 10 minutes, Layla waited in her aircraft while radio chatter indicated the Ranger situation was deteriorating rapidly. Enemy forces were advancing on their position, and casualties were mounting. Finally, the radio crackled with command's decision. "Raven 17, this is Overlord Actual," came the voice of Colonel Stevens, the mission commander. "Negative on Apache support. Intelligence indicates significant anti-aircraft threats in target area. Mission assessed as too high risk for rotary wing assets." Layla stared at her instrument panel in disbelief. "Sir, repeat last transmission. Did you say negative on air support?" "Affirmative, Raven 17. Return to standby status. We're working alternative support options." Through her headset, Layla could hear Captain Martinez's increasingly desperate radio calls. "Overlord, this is Ranger 6. We are being overrun. Enemy forces advancing from 3 directions. We need air support now or we're going to lose the entire company." "Ranger 6, stand by. We're coordinating alternative assets." Alternative assets meant calling in fixed-wing aircraft from bases hundreds of miles away, a process that would take at least 45 minutes. The Rangers didn't have 45 minutes. Layla checked her aircraft systems one more time. Engines operational, weapon systems armed, navigation programmed with the Rangers' coordinates. Her Apache was ready for combat, and American soldiers were dying 3 miles away because someone in an air-conditioned command center had decided the mission was too risky. "Tower, this is Raven 17, requesting immediate launch clearance." "Negative, Raven 17. Stand down per Overlord's orders." That's when Layla made the decision that would define everything about who she really was. She advanced her throttles to flight power and lifted off without clearance. "Raven 17, you are not cleared for takeoff," the tower controller's voice screamed through her headset. "Return to base immediately." Layla switched off her radio and turned toward the sound of gunfire 3 miles away. What followed was the most audacious solo attack helicopter mission in modern military history. Flying at 150 miles per hour, just 50 feet above the desert floor, Layla approached the target area using terrain masking to avoid enemy radar detection. Her Apache's advanced sensor systems immediately identified the tactical situation. 60-plus enemy fighters in fortified positions surrounding 12 Rangers who were pinned down in a dried riverbed with minimal cover. Through her targeting system, Layla could see exactly why Command had refused the mission. The enemy had positioned multiple shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles around the compound, creating an integrated air defense network that could engage helicopters from any approach angle. Standard military doctrine called for suppressing these threats with artillery or fixed-wing strikes before committing rotary-wing aircraft. But standard doctrine didn't account for pilots who understood that sometimes you had to accept impossible odds to save good people. Layla's first pass eliminated the eastern SAM position with 2 Hellfire missiles, creating a gap in enemy air defenses. Her second pass destroyed a heavy machine gun nest that was pinning down half the Ranger company. But the remaining enemy fighters immediately began coordinating their response, directing concentrated fire toward her aircraft. "Unknown Apache, this is Ranger 6, Captain Martinez's voice crackled through the emergency frequency. "We did not request air support. Identify yourself." "Ranger 6, this is Raven 17, providing immediate close air support. What do you need?" "Raven, we've got heavy concentrations of enemy fighters in buildings north and west of our position, but be advised, intelligence indicates significant anti-aircraft threats throughout the area." "Roger, Ranger 6, I see the threats. Beginning attack runs now." What Layla did next became mandatory study material at every Army aviation school for the next decade. Instead of using standard attack helicopter tactics that called for engaging targets from maximum range while maintaining defensive positioning, Layla flew directly into the enemy's air defense network. She used her Apache's maneuverability and advanced countermeasures to stay ahead of surface-to-air missiles while systematically destroying enemy positions from close range. Her 30-millimeter chain gun eliminated enemy fighters with surgical precision, while her Hellfire missiles destroyed fortified positions and heavy weapons. She appeared behind enemy lines before they could react, struck with overwhelming firepower, and disappeared before they could coordinate effective return fire. But most importantly, she drew enemy attention away from the pinned-down Rangers, allowing them to maneuver to better defensive positions and begin coordinating their own counterattack. For 23 minutes, Layla single-handedly fought an entire enemy battalion while providing close air support for the Rangers. Her Apache took multiple hits from small arms fire and 2 near misses from surface-to-air missiles, but she continued attacking until every immediate threat to the ground forces was eliminated. That's when she discovered something that changed everything. While conducting battle damage assessment on the destroyed enemy compound, Layla's targeting system identified 3 high-value targets that intelligence agencies had been hunting for months. Through her Apache's advanced optics, she could see them clearly. 3 men in military uniforms with distinctive insignia that matched photographs of the most wanted ISIS commanders in Iraq. General Qasim al-Rashid, General Omar al-Hakim, and General Farid al-Mansouri were standing in the compound's central courtyard, apparently coordinating an evacuation now that their defensive positions had been destroyed. These were the masterminds behind dozens of attacks on American forces. They had planned operations that killed hundreds of soldiers, coordinated suicide bombings that targeted civilian populations, and directed the very network that had just attempted to massacre an entire Ranger company. Layla had a clear shot at all three targets, but engaging them would require flying directly over the compound, through the remaining air defenses, while low on ammunition and with a damaged aircraft. It was exactly the kind of high-risk mission that Command had refused to authorize. She didn't hesitate. Layla's final attack run took her directly through the heart of enemy defenses at maximum speed. Surface-to-air missiles streaked past her aircraft as she lined up her targeting system on the three generals. Her 30mm chain gun eliminated al-Rashid with a 3-second burst. Her last two Hellfire missiles destroyed the building where al-Hakim and al-Mansouri were attempting to take cover. Within 90 seconds, she had eliminated three of the most wanted terrorist leaders in the Middle East. "Ranger 6, this is Raven 1-7, she transmitted calmly while extracting from the target area. "3 high-value targets eliminated. Area is clear for your extraction." "Raven 1-7, this is Ranger 6. We don't know who authorized your mission, but you just saved 12 American lives and accomplished what conventional operations have been trying to do for 2 years." When Layla returned to base 30 minutes later, she found Colonel Stevens waiting on the tarmac with military police and a very serious expression. "Chief Warrant Officer Hernandez," he said as she climbed out of her Apache, "you are under arrest for disobeying direct orders, unauthorized use of military aircraft, and conducting combat operations without proper authorization." Layla looked at him calmly while removing her flight helmet. "Sir, I understand the charges, but 12 Rangers are alive tonight because someone decided to help them when help was needed. That's not how military command structure works, Hernandez. You can't just decide to ignore orders because you disagree with them. Respectfully, sir, sometimes command structure fails. Sometimes people in safe locations make decisions that get soldiers killed. When that happens, someone has to step up." Colonel Stevens stared at her for a long moment. "Hernandez, do you understand that you could face court-martial for what you did today?" "Yes, sir. I understood that before I took off. But I also understood that good people were about to die if someone didn't act." What happened next surprised everyone, including Layla. Instead of a court-martial, she received a summons to report to the Pentagon for a classified briefing. The elimination of 3 high-value targets in a single mission had attracted attention from the highest levels of military command, and people wanted to understand how one Apache pilot had accomplished what months of conventional operations had failed to achieve. Brigadier General Patricia Walsh, Deputy Director of Army Aviation, conducted the briefing personally. "Chief Warrant Officer Hernandez," General Walsh began, "your actions 3 weeks ago resulted in significant tactical success, but they also violated multiple regulations and command directives. We need to understand your decision-making process." Layla sat at attention in the Pentagon conference room, surrounded by officers whose combined rank outweighed most small armies. "Ma'am, I assessed the tactical situation and determined that immediate action was required to prevent loss of American lives." "You assessed the situation," General Walsh repeated. "Are you saying you disagreed with your commanding officer's tactical assessment?" "Ma'am, I'm saying that sometimes people making decisions don't have complete information about what's actually happening on the ground. Sometimes bureaucratic safety becomes more important than soldier safety." General Walsh leaned forward. "That's a serious accusation, Chief Warrant Officer. Are you suggesting that your commanders prioritize bureaucracy over lives?" Layla met her gaze directly. "Ma'am, I'm suggesting that 12 Rangers are alive today because someone decided to ignore bureaucracy and focus on the mission." The room fell silent. Finally, General Walsh spoke again. "Hernandez, intelligence analysis confirms that the 3 targets you eliminated were indeed the individuals we've been hunting for 18 months. Your mission accomplished strategic objectives that conventional operations had failed to achieve. However, your methods violated established protocols and command authority. Yes, ma'am. What would you do if faced with the same situation again? Layla considered the question carefully. Ma'am, I would hope that command would authorize appropriate support for troops in contact. But if they didn't, and if American soldiers were about to die, I would do whatever was necessary to protect them. General Walsh studied her for a long moment. Even if it meant disobeying direct orders? Ma'am, I swore an oath to protect and defend. Sometimes that oath conflicts with following orders. When it does, I choose to protect people. 3 months later, Chief Warrant Officer Layla Hernandez received the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary heroism in aerial flight, along with promotion to Chief Warrant Officer 3. The citation read, "For heroism and extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight, evidenced by voluntary actions above and beyond the call of duty." Chief Warrant Officer Hernandez's exceptional courage, superior airmanship, and devotion to duty resulted in the successful accomplishment of a critical mission under extremely hazardous conditions. But more importantly, she received a new assignment, leading the development of new tactics, techniques, and procedures for Apache operations in high-threat environments. The Army had decided that instead of court-martialing pilots who broke rules to save lives, they should probably figure out how to change the rules. During the award ceremony, Captain Martinez, the Ranger Company commander whose soldiers she had saved, approached her afterward. "Chief Hernandez, I have a question for you," he said quietly. "How did you know we needed help badly enough to risk your career?" Layla considered the question. "Sir, I could hear it in your voice. I could hear people dying over the radio while someone in a safe location decided the mission was too dangerous. Sometimes you have to stop listening to people who aren't there and start listening to people who are." "You risked everything to save soldiers you'd never met," Martinez pointed out. "That wasn't your responsibility." "Respectfully, sir," Layla replied with the same calm certainty she'd displayed in the cockpit that day. "Protecting people who can't protect themselves is always my responsibility. That's why I'm here." 6 months later, Layla was deployed to Syria as part of a joint task force operation against ISIS remnants. Her new mission parameters gave her significantly more autonomy in tactical decision-making, a direct result of lessons learned from the Iraq incident. The Army had realized that sometimes the best way to support ground forces was to trust experienced pilots to make decisions based on real-time tactical situations rather than predetermined plans made in distant command centers. The story of what happened that day near Mosul became legendary within Army aviation communities. But Layla never sought recognition for her actions. She continued flying with the same quiet professionalism that had defined her entire military career, accepting the most dangerous missions and consistently proving that sometimes the most important qualification for completing an impossible mission isn't following orders. It's understanding when orders need to be ignored to save lives. Because for Chief Warrant Officer Layla Raven Hernandez, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves wasn't just her mission. It was who she was. On her final day at Fort Hood before deploying to Syria, Layla sat in her Apache, conducting post-flight checks after a training mission. Her crew chief, Sergeant Rodriguez, approached the aircraft with a question that had been bothering him for weeks. "Chief, can I ask you something personal? What made you decide to take off that day without clearance? You knew you could lose everything, your wings, your career, even face prison time." Layla looked up from her checklist, noting the genuine curiosity in the young sergeant's voice. Rodriguez was 22 years old, fresh out of technical school, and still believed that military regulations existed for good reasons and should always be followed. Rodriguez, have you ever been in a situation where you knew someone was about to get hurt and you were the only person who could help them? Yes, Chief. Back home in El Paso, I saw a car accident where a woman was trapped and the car was on fire. Everyone was standing around, waiting for the fire department, but I could see she wasn't going to last that long. What did you do? I broke the window and pulled her out, Chief. Didn't really think about it until afterward. Layla smiled, recognizing something familiar in his answer. Did anyone give you permission to break that window? Did you check with the fire department first? Did you wait for someone with more experience or better equipment? Rodriguez looked confused. No, Chief. There wasn't time for any of that. She needed help right then. That's exactly what I did that day near Mosul. I just happened to be in an Apache helicopter at the time instead of at a car accident. But you disobeyed direct orders, Chief. That's different than breaking a car window. Layla finished her checklist and removed her helmet, looking at the young man who reminded her of herself at that age, eager to serve, respectful of authority, but not yet understanding that sometimes authority fails people who need help. Rodriguez, I've been following orders my entire military career. I believe in the chain of command. I respect military discipline, and I understand why we have regulations. But that day, following orders meant watching 12 good soldiers die while someone in an air-conditioned office decided their lives weren't worth the risk. She climbed down from the cockpit and began securing the aircraft for the night. When following orders conflicts with doing what's right, when bureaucracy becomes more important than protecting people, when rules matter more than lives, that's when you have to choose what kind of person you really are. Even if it costs you your career, Chief? Layla stopped working and looked directly at him. Rodriguez, let me ask you something. If that woman had died in the car while you were waiting for official permission to break the window, how would you feel about yourself? Would you be proud that you followed procedures, or would you hate yourself for letting someone die when you could have saved them? The sergeant was quiet for a moment. I'd hate myself, Chief. I couldn't live with knowing I had the chance to help and chose not to. Exactly. Now imagine that instead of one person, it's 12 soldiers with families who love them, children who need them, futures that matter. Imagine knowing that you have the tools and skills to save them, but someone who isn't there and doesn't understand the situation has decided it's too dangerous to try. Rodriguez nodded slowly, beginning to understand. So you couldn't live with yourself if you followed orders and let them die. That's right. Careers are temporary, Rodriguez. Lives are permanent. I can always find another job, but those Rangers only get one life. Someone had to make sure they got to keep it. As they finished securing the aircraft, Rodriguez asked one more question. Chief, what if you had been wrong? What if the mission really was too dangerous and you had been shot down? Layla considered this seriously. Then I would have died trying to save people instead of living with the knowledge that I let them die because I was afraid to try. I can accept the first outcome, but I couldn't accept the second. The next morning, as Layla prepared to board the transport aircraft for her Syria deployment, she found a note tucked into her flight bag. It was from Rodriguez, written in the careful handwriting of someone who wasn't used to expressing deep thoughts on paper. Chief Hernandez, the note read, thank you for teaching me that being a good soldier sometimes means being willing to be a bad soldier. I understand now that following orders isn't the same as doing what's right, and that the best people are the ones who choose to do what's right, even when it costs them everything. If I'm ever in a situation where I have to choose between rules and people, I'll remember what you taught me. Some things are more important than following orders. Some people are worth risking everything to protect. Thank you for showing me what it means to serve something bigger than yourself. The next morning, Layla boarded a transport aircraft for her deployment to Syria, carrying with her the lessons learned from that day near Mosul. Sometimes the most important missions are the ones command refuses to authorize. Sometimes the most heroic actions are the ones that violate regulations. And sometimes protecting people requires ignoring the people who are supposed to protect you. But most importantly, she carried the knowledge that when good people are in danger, impossible missions become necessary missions, and necessary missions always find a way to get completed by people who understand that some things are more important than following orders. Chief Warrant Officer Layla Raven. Hernandez had learned that sometimes being a soldier means choosing between being a good soldier and being a good person. When that choice comes, the best soldiers always choose to be good people first, and sometimes that choice saves lives that policies and procedures would have sacrificed to bureaucratic safety. In the end, that's the difference between following orders and following your oath. Orders come from people who aren't there, but oaths come from principles that never leave you. For Layla Hernandez, the oath was simple. Protect people who can't protect themselves, even when the people giving orders say it's too dangerous to try. That day near Mosul, she proved that sometimes one person with the courage to do what's right can accomplish what entire command structures fail to achieve, bringing everyone home alive. And in a world where bureaucracy often matters more than lives, sometimes that's exactly the kind of soldier the world needs most. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.